I've lived in this house for 35 years, but I've never truly called it home. It's the kind of place that seems to breathe when you're not listening. A slow, rhythmic exhale through its warped floorboards and cracked plaster walls. My grandfather left it to me after his passing, just as his grandfather left it to him. The place is ancient, built long before electricity ran through the valley, before roads stitched the hills together. It stands alone, hunched like an old animal among the pine trees, its windows yellowed and uneven, its roof sagging under time's weight. Guests never last long here. They say it smells wrong, not of dust or mold, but something older, something wet and metallic that clings to the air like a whisper you can't quite hear. They say the walls seem to watch them. Some refuse to enter the house at all once they reach the front gate. And honestly, I can't blame them. The house doesn't welcome people. It only tolerates them until it decides not to. When I was a child, I used to think the house was alive. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to hear faint thumping under the floorboards, like someone pacing beneath me. My parents would tell me it was the pipes or raccoons, but I knew better. The basement had always called to me, softly at first, then insistently. The door at the bottom of the staircase was always locked, but sometimes, at night, I'd hear it clicking open on its own. Just a faint sound, like a tongue unlocking secrets. When I inherited the place after my grandfather's death, I swore I'd never go down there. I kept the basement sealed, hammering nails into the doorframe. But lately, the house has started to change. At night, I hear my grandfather's voice calling from below, hoarse, muffled, pleading. "You have to see," it says. "You have to remember." Last week, I woke up to find all the nails I'd hammered into the basement door scattered neatly across the hallway floor. The door itself was wide open. I stood at the top of the stairs, flashlight trembling in my hand, looking down into the blackness. The air that rose from below was cold, not just cold, but wrong. It smelled like burnt wood and iron, like something ancient trying to claw its way into my lungs. My body screamed to run, but the whispering grew louder, threading through the air. "Come down, it's time." I stepped onto the first stair. The wood groaned under my weight, and the sound echoed far deeper than the basement should have been. Each step downward felt longer than the one before it, as though the staircase was stretching. My flashlight flickered, once, twice, then went out completely. For a moment, I stood in absolute darkness, surrounded by silence so deep it felt alive. Then I saw it, a faint glow at the far end of the basement, like moonlight leaking through a crack in reality. As I approached, I realized it wasn't light coming in, but light spilling out from a small iron door built into the concrete wall. I'd never seen it before, and yet, somehow I remembered it. My hand shook as I reached for the handle. It was ice cold. The instant my fingers touched the metal, I felt a violent pull, like gravity reversing. A rushing sound, a blur of color, then silence again. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in the same house. But it wasn't now. The wallpaper was new, the air smelled of coal smoke, and I heard a child crying upstairs. My own voice, from 30 years ago. The house had taken me back to my own fear. The sound of that child's crying tore through the still air, high and trembling, unmistakably mine. I knew that sob. I remembered the way my voice cracked, the way my breath hitched between tears. It was the night I first saw the shadow in my bedroom, the thing that crawled from the wall and whispered my name. I was 7 years old then, but as I stood there now, fully grown, the memory slammed into me like a wave I'd tried to forget. The hallway stretched before me just as it had decades ago. The old patterned carpet, the chipped banister, the faint smell of my grandmother's perfume drifting through the air. I could even hear the faint hum of her favorite radio program coming from the living room below. Every detail was perfect, too perfect. This wasn't a dream. The house had reconstructed this memory, rebuilt it around me like a stage. I started toward the stairs. With each step, the sound of my younger self sobbing grew louder. The light bulbs flickered above, glowing the same dull amber as they had the night I hid under my blanket, praying for the darkness to end. I reached the bedroom door and paused. My hand trembled as I touched the doorknob. Inside, the air was cold. My childhood self sat on the bed, knees drawn to his chest, eyes fixed on the corner of the room. I followed his gaze, and there it was, a darker patch of shadow pulsing like a living thing. It rippled against the wall as though breathing. Even now, after all these years, my chest tightened at the sight of it. The shadow began to move. It stretched upward, forming the faint outline of a person, though its limbs were too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. The younger me whimpered, and I felt it in my bones, the pure, instinctive terror that had once haunted me for months afterward. I wanted to grab the child, to drag him away, to shout that it wasn't real. But the air between us felt solid, like glass. I couldn't reach him. I couldn't change anything. Then the shadow turned toward me. Its face was a smear of darkness, but I felt its gaze, heavy, suffocating, recognizing. For a moment, I thought it would lunge at the boy. Instead, it stepped forward, right toward me. The glassy barrier shattered with a sound like cracking ice, and the room spun violently. The shadow's whisper filled my head. "You never left," it breathed. "You never grew up. You just forgot." My vision blurred. The room melted away, and when I blinked, I was no longer in the past. I stood once again in the basement, gasping, the iron doors still glowing faintly behind me. My hand shook as I reached for the wall to steady myself, my palms slick with sweat. But something had changed. Across the concrete, symbols were carved. Deep, fresh marks that hadn't been there before. Circles within circles, intersecting lines, and in the center of it all, one word: remember. I staggered backward, heart pounding. The house creaked around me, as if reacting to my return. I could hear faint whispers in the ceiling above, voices murmuring my name, the same cadence as my grandfather's old voice calling from his study. "You have to see," it said again. "It's not done yet." When I looked back at the iron door, it was closed once more, but a faint hum vibrated in the air, like the heartbeat of something waiting. I ran upstairs and bolted the door behind me, forcing a chair under the handle. But even as I sat there, trying to slow my breathing, I could feel it, a faint warmth pulsing from beneath the floorboards, like something alive beneath my feet. For the first time, I realized this wasn't about the house wanting to hurt me. It wanted to show me something. But what? And worse, if the door could send me back once, could it do it again? For 3 nights after the door incident, I didn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt amplified. Every creak, every sigh of the wind through the chimney. I left the lights on, but even then, the shadows seemed to move when I wasn't looking. The whispers had grown bolder now, following me from room to room, repeating fragments of the same message. You have to see. On the fourth day, exhaustion won. I made coffee, sat at my grandfather's old desk, and started digging through the boxes he'd left behind. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, only that my instincts told me the answers weren't in the walls, but in the memories of those who'd lived within them. The papers were brittle with age, deeds, letters, yellowed photographs. Most were ordinary family documents, but tucked beneath a stack of receipts, I found a small, leather-bound journal. The cover was cracked, the initials RH embossed in faded gold. My grandfather's name was Richard Harlan. The entries began in the 1940s. They were disjointed, written in a hurried scrawl that became shakier with each page. He wrote about the sickness in the house, about voices in the pipes, and the pull beneath the floor. Then, on one page near the end, the words turned frantic. The door opened again last night. Father's voice came through this time. He said the basement is not a place, but a tether, a wound in time that our family keeps reopening. It feeds on what we fear most. If I don't stop it, it will pass to my grandson. I stared at the sentence until my hands began to shake. My grandfather had known. I flipped to the final page. There was a crude drawing, a symbol matching the one I'd seen carved into the basement wall, circles intersecting in impossible geometry. Underneath, he'd written a single phrase: to break the chain, remember the first terror. The words hit me like a cold wind. The first terror. What did he mean? My earliest fear? The shadow in my room? Or something deeper, something buried too far back to recall? A sudden noise made me jump. A low rhythmic knocking from below. 3 knocks. A pause. Then 3 more. I froze. The journal clutched to my chest. The sound was coming from the basement door again. My mind screamed at me to leave, but something stronger, curiosity, maybe desperation, drove me down the hall. The air grew heavier the closer I got, filled with that metallic scent again. The door was trembling slightly in its frame, the handle rattling as if something on the other side wanted out. When I reached for it, the knocking stopped. Silence. Then a whisper, low and close. Remember me. The door creaked open on its own. The basement was pitch black, but I could see the faint outline of the iron door in the far wall. Its edges glowed faintly red this time, like cooling metal. I took 1 step forward, then another. The air hummed, vibrating through my bones. The symbols on the concrete seemed to shimmer in response to my movements. I opened the journal again, scanning the last page. Beneath the drawing, almost invisible under layers of dust and age, there were faintly etched words I hadn't noticed before. The door opens where the blood remembers. I didn't know what that meant, until I felt a sting on my palm. I looked down. A thin line of blood had appeared across my skin, though I hadn't touched anything sharp. The blood dripped to the floor, landing directly on one of the carved symbols. The air shuddered. The door pulsed. Before I could react, the basement lurched, walls bending inward, floor twisting beneath me. The door flared white and pulled me forward with the force of a storm. I tried to grab the railing, but it was gone. The world spun, and the next moment, I was somewhere else entirely. The air smelled of burning oil. Machinery clanked in the distance. I stood in the same house again, but this time it was older still. Candlelight flickered in sconces, and at the far end of the hallway I saw a man who looked like my grandfather, only younger. He was standing before the iron door, whispering to it. The man before the iron door didn't see me at first. His back was hunched, his face half lit by the trembling candle in his hand. Even from a distance, I could feel the weight of his fear, the kind that leaks from the bones, that shapes generations. The air was thick, almost liquid, every breath heavy with smoke and salt. I took a step forward. The floorboards creaked, and the man froze. Slowly, he turned toward me, and I realized it really was him, my grandfather, Richard Harlan, 30 years younger, eyes wide with the same haunted look I'd seen in his portraits. He raised the candle, and its light flickered across his trembling face. "Who's there?" he rasped. "Show yourself." For a moment I couldn't speak. I just stared at him, at a man who died decades ago, now standing in front of me, alive and breathing in the house that never slept. "Grandpa?" The word escaped before I could stop it. His eyes widened further. "No," he whispered. "Not yet. It's too soon." He stumbled backward, knocking over the candle. It rolled across the floor, sputtering in a pool of wax. But the iron door behind him began to glow again. Faintly at first, then stronger, a heartbeat of light pulsing from its center. I could feel it pulling me. The same invisible force that had dragged me through time before. My grandfather reached toward me, his face contorted in panic. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "It's feeding on you now." "What is it?" I shouted. "What's happening to our family?" He glanced back at the door, then at me, jaw tight. "It's a wound, boy," he said hoarsely, a tear that never closed. My grandfather made it. He thought he could cheat death, but he only found a way to trap us inside time itself. Every Harlan who's lived here keeps it alive through our fears. He knelt and pressed his palm against one of the glowing symbols. The light dimmed slightly, like it recognized him. "It doesn't want the house," he said. "It wants memory. Our fear keeps it open. If you're here, that means the door's waking again." My heart pounded. "Then how do we stop it?" He looked at me with hollow eyes. "You can't stop it until you remember the first time it called your name. It's not the shadow you saw, it's what came before that, the thing you buried." I wanted to ask what he meant, but a deep, vibrating sound filled the air, a metallic groan, as though the house itself were twisting. My grandfather backed away from the door, shouting something I couldn't hear. The symbols on the wall began to flare red, one by one, spinning like clock gears. Then the door burst open. A blast of cold air hit us both. Darkness poured out, not just the absence of light, but something alive. It crawled across the floor, twisting, reaching. The same shadow I'd seen as a child emerged, taller now, more defined, its shape flickering like smoke around a burning core. My grandfather screamed. He grabbed my arm, his grip ice cold. "Go!" he shouted. "It wants me, not you." Before I could react, the shadow lunged. It struck him first, a soundless impact that made the air ripple. He fell backward, eyes wide, his body swallowed in the writhing dark. The last thing I heard from him was a whisper that wasn't quite his own. "Remember me." The door's pull returned, violent this time, dragging everything toward its center. The basement warped again, walls bending like melted glass. I tried to resist, clawing at the floor, but the force was too strong. The world snapped, light shattered, and then everything was gone. When I came to, I was lying in the kitchen. Sunlight poured weakly through the windows, though it felt wrong, too pale, too cold. The clock on the wall ticked backward. My hand throbbed. When I looked down, a new mark had appeared on my palm. A small spiral, the same shape as the symbol in the basement. My blood had branded me. And somewhere below, through the floorboards, I heard the faint sound of humming. It wasn't my grandfather's voice anymore. It was mine. When I finally stood up, my vision swam. The sunlight had the sickly hue of early morning, though I had no idea how much time had passed. My phone said it was 3:17 a.m., but the light outside argued otherwise. Everything felt inverted, off balance, like the house itself had forgotten what hour it was supposed to be. The humming beneath the floorboards continued, low, steady, and unmistakably human. It matched my own tone when I exhaled, as if the sound were echoing my breath. I pressed my ear to the wooden floor. The vibration was rhythmic, pulsing in the same pattern as my heartbeat. Something inside me whispered, "It's sinking with you." I stumbled into the study, desperate to ground myself in something normal. The old desk where my grandfather once sat was exactly as I'd left it, except for one thing. A leather-bound journal lay open in the center, its pages clean and white. It wasn't my grandfather's. This one was new. I recognized the cover. It was the same kind of notebook I'd bought last month. But I had never opened this one, never written in it. Or so I thought. Across the first page, in neat, deliberate handwriting, were the words, Part 1, The House That Never Slept. My breath caught. I turned the page. Part 2, Echoes of Fear. Then Part 3, then Part 4. They were all there. My words, my story, everything that had happened since I first opened the basement door. Every sentence, every thought, perfectly transcribed. But the ink was dry, and the paper smelled faintly of smoke, as though it had been written long ago. I flipped to the last filled page. My hand trembled when I read the final line. When you read this, you will no longer be alone in the house. The words burned themselves into my vision. Behind me, something creaked, soft, slow, deliberate. The air turned colder. I turned around. There, standing in the doorway, was a silhouette. Human, but not. Its body was dark, like the shadow from my childhood, but now its edges rippled with faint light, as if it were made of shifting glass. And its face was my own. It smiled. "Still writing?" it asked in my voice. My throat went dry. "What are you?" The reflection tilted its head, that same unnatural angle I'd seen before. "I'm what you left behind, the part of you that stayed when you ran upstairs all those years ago." It stepped closer, and the light in the room flickered. "Every time you were afraid, I grew stronger. Every page you wrote, every memory you tried to bury, I was there. And now," its hand, my hand, reached toward me. "Now the door's open again because you remembered." I stumbled backward, hitting the desk. The journal fell to the floor, pages fluttering open to a blank section at the end. The pen rolled toward me, stopping by my foot. On the empty page, new words began to appear in black ink, one letter at a time. Part of 5, the diary that wrote itself. He met himself in the doorway, the one who remembered everything he had tried to forget. I watched in frozen horror as the next sentence began to write itself, describing exactly what I was doing right now. He turned toward the mirror behind him. I froze. There was no mirror in the study, at least not before. But now, the wall opposite the desk rippled like liquid glass, and a faint reflection stared back at me. The other me smiled wider, lifting his hand toward the glass. The words in the journal continued to write themselves. He touched the mirror, and that's when he realized the reflection wasn't trapped behind it. The figure stepped out. It was cold to the touch, but solid. I stumbled back, heart racing as it whispered, "You wrote me into being, and now I'll write you out." The lights went out. The last thing I saw before the room went black was the journal's final line forming beneath the moving pen. Part 6 begins when he opens his eyes again, but it won't be him looking. When I opened my eyes again, the world was paper, flat, pale, endless. I was standing inside the study, or at least something that looked like it. Every object, every wall, every shadow was sketched in ink, the lines trembling faintly as if freshly drawn. The air smelled of dust and old parchment. My hands weren't flesh anymore, but made of faded graphite strokes, moving jerkily when I tried to flex my fingers. The journal lay open on the desk beside me, but now it was enormous, each page towering like a wall. On the right-hand side, words bled into existence in black, curling handwriting. I realized, with dawning horror, that they described exactly what I was doing at that moment. He touched the desk and felt the grain beneath his fingers, or rather, the idea of it. My breath quickened. I looked toward the door, but the words followed me, spiraling across the walls, predicting every step I took. He walked toward the door, even though he knew it would not lead anywhere real. I stopped moving. The letters paused, too. For a heartbeat, the silence was complete, until a faint whisper rose from behind the pages, from deep within the spine of the book. "Keep reading." The voice was mine again. Or maybe it was the other me, the reflection, the one who'd stepped out of the mirror. I turned toward the sound and saw movement between the lines of text. Something was pushing from beneath the paper, distorting the surface, as though a hand was trying to claw its way out. The paper split with a sound like tearing cloth, and he emerged, my double, ink black and glistening, eyes hollow white. He stepped forward, leaving streaks of darkness behind him. "You wrote us both here," he said, smiling that terrible smile. "Now only one of us gets to leave." I backed away, knocking over an inky lamp that splattered across the floor like spilled blood. The ink spread fast, covering the words around me, erasing them. And as it did, the walls of the study began to dissolve. The scene melted, dripping down into the floor until I was falling again through a tunnel of spinning letters and pages. When I hit the ground, I was back in the basement, the real one, or so it seemed, concrete underfoot, the faint hum of the house above. My heart slammed against my ribs. The iron door was closed again. No glow, no whispers. Everything was silent, except the journal lay open in front of the door, resting perfectly upright, as though waiting for me. Its pages fluttered, though there was no breeze. On the newest page, written in neat script, were the words, "Welcome back to the first terror." My stomach dropped. The phrase my grandfather had written, the one he said would end the curse. And then the air changed. The faint scent of dust and metal filled my nose. and a soft, childlike sob echoed from behind me. I turned. At the bottom of the basement steps sat a small boy, his knees drawn up to his chest. His hair was messy, his face buried in his arms. My throat tightened. I knew him instantly. It was me, 7 years old, shaking, barefoot, wearing the pajamas with faded rocket ships that I hadn't seen since the night I saw the shadow. "Hey," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "It's okay. I'm you. I'm here now." The child looked up slowly. His eyes were wet and terrified. But when he spoke, it wasn't in my voice. It was something older, deeper. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. The floor groaned. The air grew heavy again, pressing down on me. The walls began to twist, the concrete warping like melted wax. The iron door behind me shuddered violently, light leaking through its edges once more. Not white this time, but red, like the glow of dying embers. The child stood, pointing at the door. "It's not done yet," he whispered. "You still haven't remembered what happened before the shadow." The room trembled, the light flared brighter, and in that moment, everything in me screamed to run. But I couldn't move. My feet were rooted to the floor. The child took a step backward toward the red light, his face fading into static. "Come find me," he said, and disappeared through the door. The handle turned on its own. The door swung open, releasing a low, endless hum that seemed to come from inside my skull. I stared into the crimson void, every nerve in my body screaming, every instinct begging me to stop. But I knew this was the first terror, the one that started everything. I stepped through. The red light swallowed everything. For a few endless seconds, I couldn't tell if I was falling, floating, or simply dissolving into the glow. The air burned, thick with the scent of iron and old smoke. A sound filled my ears, low at first, then rising, like 1,000 whispers, merging into one drawn-out breath. When the world finally steadied, I found myself standing in the same house again. But it was wrong. The walls were clean and bright, the furniture new, untouched by dust. The air shimmered, too warm, almost feverish. I knew this version of the house. It was the night everything began. Somewhere above, a clock struck midnight. I followed the sound up the staircase, my hand grazing the polished rail. The wood was warm, pulsing, faintly alive. My heart pounded. I remembered this moment too well. The night I saw the shadow, but my gut told me there was more. Something I had never allowed myself to recall. At the top of the stairs, I heard voices, my parents. They were arguing. My father's voice was sharp, angry, layered with something like fear. My mother was crying, their words twisted together, muffled through the closed bedroom door. I pressed my ear to the wood. "Told you not to open it," my father hissed. "You don't read from it, ever. It remembers. It..." Then silence. I pushed the door open. Inside, the room was dark except for a single oil lamp burning on the dresser. My parents stood near the bed, frozen mid-argument. My father's face was pale, his hand clenched around a leather-bound book, the same journal I'd found decades later. My mother's eyes darted toward me, wide with terror. "Tommy," she whispered. "Go back to your room." The sound of my childhood name sent a chill through me. She wasn't speaking to me. She was speaking to the child me. And sure enough, when I turned, I saw him standing in the doorway, small, trembling, staring at the journal in my father's hand. "I heard something," the boy said, "downstairs." My father's grip tightened around the book. "You didn't hear anything." But even as he spoke, the floorboards beneath us began to groan, a slow, heavy creaking sound that wasn't coming from footsteps. It was coming from below, from the basement. My father went still. "No," he whispered. "Not again." He dropped the book and ran for the hallway, but the child didn't follow. He just stared at the journal lying open on the floor. The pages fluttered, though there was no breeze. Words formed across them in looping black ink, the same impossible script I'd seen before. My mother grabbed him by the shoulders. "Don't look," she cried. "Close your eyes." But he didn't. He read. The light from the pages grew blinding. My mother screamed. The walls warped. The furniture splintered. And for a second, I saw something behind her, a shape rising from the ink itself, black and shifting, stretching taller than the ceiling, the shadow. But this time, I saw its face, and it wasn't faceless at all. It was my father's. The child fell backward, screaming. The book snapped shut on its own, but it was too late. The thing that wore my father's face reached out, its form flickering like smoke. It turned toward me, the adult me, and spoke in his voice, distorted and hollow. "Every fear is inherited. Every wound remembers. You opened what we sealed." The air split open. The red light returned, pouring from the cracks in the walls. The child and the shadow were pulled toward it, their forms dissolving into the glow. I tried to move, to save him, to save myself, but the pull was too strong. The journal flew into my hands. The final page was blank, waiting. My fingers moved on their own, writing words I couldn't control. The door was never built to keep things out. It was built to keep them in. The light swallowed everything again. When it faded, I was standing once more in the basement, in the present. The journal lay open before me, the last page still wet with ink. My hand throbbed where the spiral mark had been burned into it, and faint smoke rose from the center. The iron door stood silent, closed, but this time something new had appeared carved into the concrete beside it. Fresh words in my handwriting. "Only one of us can leave." And from behind the door, faintly, so faintly I almost thought I imagined it, came the sound of a heartbeat. My own. The heartbeat behind the door grew louder, slow, rhythmic, almost steady enough to lull me into forgetting it wasn't supposed to be there. Each pulse vibrated through the concrete, sinking again with the one hammering in my chest, the same rhythm, the same life. I stared at the carved words. Only one of us can leave. The air around me was thick, humid, with the scent of rust and something older, like the breath of the earth itself. The house groaned above, beams shifting as if reacting to my thoughts. Every time I blinked, the basement seemed to lean closer, the walls bending ever so slightly inward. My grandfather's voice echoed faintly through memory. To break the chain, remember the first terror. I had remembered. I had seen everything. My father, the journal, the shadow born from fear itself. The house wasn't cursed by accident. It was built to contain it, to bind the creature that grew from generations of the Harlan family's dread. And now, the door wasn't just a boundary. It was an invitation. My reflection, the one that had stepped out of the mirror, had vanished when I returned from the red light. Or maybe it hadn't. Maybe it was the heartbeat behind that iron barrier. Maybe it was waiting for me to finish what our ancestors began. I knelt beside the door, tracing the symbols carved into the concrete. They pulsed faintly beneath my fingertips. The journal lay open beside me, pages turning on their own, stopping on the final entry. The handwriting wasn't mine anymore. It was shifting, alive. One must stay, one must remember. The hum of the house deepened. Dust fell from the ceiling. The air grew so cold I could see my breath. I pressed my hand against the door. It felt warm, almost human, and beneath the surface I could feel something pressing back, fingers mirroring mine from the other side. I swallowed hard. "Who are you?" A whisper leaked through the cracks. "You already know." The voice was my own, but softer, sad, tired. "Let me out," it said. "We can end this together." I hesitated. "If I open this door, what happens to me?" "You'll remember everything," it replied, "and then you'll take my place." That's when I understood. The door didn't just hold the monster. It was the monster. It kept the family's fear locked in one body at a time. A vessel passed from generation to generation. My grandfather had held it. My father had failed to contain it. And now, it was my turn. The door vibrated harder, the heartbeat rising to a pounding roar. Cracks spread across the concrete, glowing faintly red. My hand burned, the spiral on my palm igniting with pain. I could barely breathe. The house was screaming now, wood splintering, windows shattering upstairs. The journal's final words appeared before my eyes, scrawled by an invisible hand. The door will open either way. The only choice is who stays behind. The handle began to turn, slowly, deliberately. I stumbled backward, heart racing, every instinct screaming to run. But where could I go? The house had sealed itself, every window blackened, every light flickering. The heartbeat was inside me now, drumming louder, faster, matching my panic perfectly. Then the door cracked open. A wave of hot air hit me, stinking of smoke and decay. From the darkness beyond, a figure stepped forward, a perfect mirror of me. Except its eyes were black voids, swirling with faint red light. "I waited," it said. "Now you can rest." I shook my head, clutching the journal. No, not this time. I threw the book into the opening. The pages burst into flame the instant they crossed the threshold, the symbols around the door flaring white-hot. The creatures screamed, my scream, and lunged, but I slammed the door shut with every ounce of strength left in me. There was a flash, bright as lightning, and then silence. The house went still. When I opened my eyes, I was lying at the bottom of the basement steps. Morning light seeped through the cracks above. The door was gone. No iron, no carvings, just smooth, blank wall. The heartbeat was gone too. The air smelled of ash and rain. I stood shakily, clutching my burned hand. The spiral mark had faded. The journal lay on the floor, its cover charred, its pages blank. Every word, every story erased. It was over. At least, that's what I told myself. That night, as I sat in the study, a faint creak echoed from the floorboards beneath me. Steady, rhythmic, the sound of something breathing. And on the wall across from me, where the iron door had once been, new words were slowly etching themselves into the plaster. Letters forming, one by one, as if carved by invisible hands. The house remembers. Do you? Question for the viewer. If you inherited this house, knowing what waits beneath it, would you dare to live there, just to see if the door opens for you?